Okay, let's get this show on the road. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnetka Village Council regular meeting for July 19th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask everybody in the room to please mute or turn off your other electronic devices. I'll ask Rob to do a roll call for attendance.
Trustee Apatow? Here. Trustee Mancini?
Here.
Trustee Swerk?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn? Here. President Rins.
Present. Item 2 is the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Trustee Swerk to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, quorum check.
Yes. August 2nd, regular meeting. Okay. It's transition night. Okay. Thank you. So I've been polling you for a potential study session for August, and there's just all kinds of conflicts. So 9th, our regularly scheduled night, does that look to be available for you all? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll follow up on that one as we get more info. Chris, do you want to add any more to that or no?
Nope.
Okay. And then August 16th. Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Item 4 is public comment. This is the time of the evening where anyone from the audience, they can come on up to the microphone and address Village Council on any item that is not on the agenda. Would anybody like to speak this evening? Seeing none, I will close public comment and move on with reports. We'll start out with trustees. John, any report this evening?
I have no report.
Bob? Kim? Rob?
One quick thing, I made an error on the farmer's market. I mentioned that the flower display that was put up, I mentioned the wrong flower group.
I bet you really took it at home.
Bad idea. So it was a remarkable display put on by the Garden Guild of Winnetka. So my error, but they did such a great job, I wanted to make sure it was right.
I have to admit, Rob, when I heard it coming out of your mouth, I sat here thinking, oh, man, I don't want to be here.
It really was great.
Well, thank you for the mea culpa. We all
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And we do have a revised minutes corrected on the dais as
Thank
well. All right, village attorney? No report tonight. Village manager?
Nothing tonight.
And village president? I have no report this evening. Item 6, approval of the agenda. Does any trustee wish to remove an item from the consent agenda for a separate vote? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the final form of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 7 is the consent agenda. I'll ask the village clerk to read the items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Approval of the Village Council meeting minutes for June 7th, 2022 regular meeting, June 14th, 2022 study session. Approval of the warrant list dated May 17th, 2022 through May 30th, 2022 in the amount of $1,409,489.87. Approval of the warrant list dated May 31st, 2022 through June 13th, 2022 in the amount of $947,819.14. Approval of the warrant list dated June 14th, 2022 through June 27th in the amount of $2,320,141.30. And approval of outdoor seating application for Yamoto.
Okay, thanks, Rob. May I have a motion to, oh, no, is that all right? Yeah, oh yeah, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda by omnibus vote?
Second.
Roll call vote.
Trustee Dearborn? Yes. Trustee Mancini?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
That motion carries. Item 8, ordinances and resolutions. 8A is ordinance number MC2 2022, refuse, curbside, village code. This is a village code update. Village staff is suggesting amending the village code pertaining to garbage and refuse regulations related to curbside service. Our Public Works Director, Gio McLean, is here this evening to introduce, and Public Works Analyst Diana Puga is also here to help out.
Thank you, President Rintz. Good evening, President Rintz, village trustees, village manager Bayhan. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce the Assistant Director for Public Works, our Eric Jensen. And then I'd like to introduce Diana Puga, who will be providing the amendments to the village code on the garbage and refuse code. So at this time, Diana, you're up to bat.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, President Rintz, Village Council, and Village Manager Bayhan. As Director McLean mentioned, I will be reviewing the proposed amendments, which are additions or clarifications to the Village Code for existing practices. The amendments will be presented chronologically with the Village Code. Historically, and prior to June 2021, the Village offered only backdoor collection services to all residents. In June of 2021, the Village expanded its refuse services to include a curbside collection program. There are currently 5 service levels for refuse: backdoor collection once or twice a week, and curbside with a choice of a 35, 65, or a 95-gallon receptacle. Alley residents continue to receive services in the alley regardless of the refuse subscription. Staff has closely observed the program, and the following recommendations to the Village Code are based on a survey of area communities, the Village's experience of curbside service implementation, and established standards for refuse and recycling collection services. The addition of a recycling definition under definitions, which is consistent with the Environmental Protection Act definition, codifies recycling as part of waste removal. Historically, the Village provided in-house services for both refuse and recycling. The Village continues to outsource recycling collection, and the addition of this definition clearly delineates the difference between refuse and recycling collections. The addition of a new section, receptacles for refuse, is a new section which establishes current practice in which backdoor collection residents are responsible for the purchasing and maintenance of their own receptacles. And curbside residents are responsible for maintaining good order of their village-issued receptacles. The addition of this section codifies this practice across all customer types and allows the village to maintain standards for aesthetics and hygiene. The addition of language in the section for location of receptacles, which indicates where residents should be storing The addition of language in the section for location of receptacles, which indicates where receptacles should be stored on non-collection days, mitigates concerns for maintaining village aesthetics by ensuring receptacles are not visible from streets on non-collection days. The amendment of the section open burning provides clarification and expands to include the prohibition of open burning of rubbish and yard waste. The insertion of language in the section responsibilities of owner defines guidelines for collection, when receptacles should be placed out and removed, and associated fees for rerouting staff, which is consistent with the special collection fee. The insertion of language under the section location of receptacles, which covers where receptacles should be placed on collection days, covers additional responsibilities of the resident to ensure continuity of their service. This clarification is necessary to create standards for curbside and backdoor service, minimizes the chance of a missed collection, and codifies current practices for recycling collection. The addition of section for disposal of large and bulk items, which is considered special collections, is a service the village has provided historically, but has not been codified except in the annual utility services resolution. I would take any questions now.
Thanks, Diana. Good job.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
A couple. I'm just curious, so with this curbside or backdoor, what percentage is now curbside?
It's currently we have a 62% subscription rate for the curbside program.
How much?
62%.
So I thought it'd be a lot higher than that. Wow. Okay, so 62%.
Correct, yes.
Is it help? Is it still done by hand? I'm just curious. I know they bring those carts around. I know recycling, they put it and there's an automatic lever. Does the garbage refuse have that as well if it's curbside, or doesn't matter?
So unfortunately, the current fleet that we have for refuse services does not have the front lifting mechanism,
Okay.
which would accommodate the drive-by lifting. Right now, we have to manually go out and pull the containers
Still.
to the back of the truck and then use a different lifting mechanism, which kind of makes it a little more specific to the containers we're using at this time, trustee.
Well, I got one of those 95ers I wouldn't want to try and lift that, so I guess that's my, I was wondering
not a
what the
problem.
size of that container, if that is done manually, or if that's,
So the only containers that are being done manually are backdoor service. Backdoor service consists of two 37-gallon containers. And by restricting the size of those containers, it also reduces or restricts the amount of weight that the refuse workers had to lift. All curbside containers or receptacles are being lifted by the rear lifting mechanism. Nothing's being lifted manually by the employees.
and technically, no one should have their own, because I just did, no one should have their own containers anymore. Is that correct?
No, trustee. The backdoor service still requires each resident to have their own
Their own.
containers.
Okay. It's just because we switched to the curbside. Okay.
That's correct,
That's
trustee.
helpful. Thank you.
Sorry, Dan. Go ahead.
Great.
Others?
I would just say that when we talked about instituting this curbside service and so on, one of the concerns at the time was, aesthetics in the village. And just driving through other villages, Chris, I think you shared that concern, that it can look sloppy and things can blow all over people, putting them out 4 days in advance. I think codifying this is really good. I think there's enough flexibility there from a timing standpoint. So I'm personally glad to see this in place, and hopefully we really won't have any enforcement. I mean, I think it's, at least in my neighborhood, works out pretty well, but it's good to have it in place.
How are we sharing this news with people so that they follow the rules?
You want to answer that one?
Sorry, trustee Mancini. Which portion of the news are we sharing? Are you?
So how long it needs to be out, where it needs to be placed, where you should keep it in the back.
Well, once the village code has been publicly approved by the village council, we'll start working with the communications department to make sure that that's communicated to the residents effectively.
Newsletters, okay, great.
I have two questions. Bearing the homeowner to be responsible for maintenance of the receptacle, this seems not fair in a way, especially if you get to the point where your chips get damaged in the future, if there's a chip thing. I don't want to be paying for a new chip container. Squirrels already ate through my covers. I don't want to replace that. I'm okay with it, but that's an unknown expense or if someone steals it, am I responsible for it? So those are big unknown questions.
Someone steals your garbage can?
Yeah, I don't know. Never happened, but if it does, I don't think I want to be responsible.
Trustee Swerk, I'd like to confirm that we actually provide a warranty period for the refuse bins. Unfortunately, animal activity isn't covered under that warranty, but regular wear and tear, wheels, hinges, any of the pulley systems that are attached to that container are covered under the warranty period as well.
Yeah, so and if it gets to the point where the machine does actually pick it up later, just repeated times of wear and tear and getting slammed around, I don't think it should be part of the refuse cost budget somewhere and not an individual owner. That's just my thinking. You can discuss that as you want.
Well, how would you address that problem then, John?
I think the village owns the container. If it gets damaged, the village replaces it.
Unless it's negligence. Yeah, I hear you.
Someone drives over it or a snowplow hits it. You just never know.
What are you putting in your garbage cans that animals can eat through it?
Well,
You must have good
what is
garbage.
that? Is that not?
I'm kidding.
What if it's in the street and someone drives over the curb and hits it?
Yeah.
It's like it's not the owners.
Yeah.
And it should just be part of the line item budget, I think, for refuge. That you got to replace those as needed if the covers start falling off or something. So
Yeah.
that's a mindful thing. And then 816-140 talks about in the alley in the right of way, 7 a.m. When you say alley, is that also cover the right of way of the alley? I'm just trying to keep that. It's also a right of way, even though it's not really the alley. You don't put it in the middle of the alley where you drive. It's still in the right of way side of the alley. Is our right of way described as both sides of the property in the actual terms if you're just trying to clean up the ordinance or the rules?
So the alley collection, as it stands, if it's not on the private property, typically backdoor service would include the location of the container being in the alley right away, not in the road itself.
Right, I understand.
So that position doesn't change, whether it's back door or curbside. There are residents that actually that have alley service, that have backdoor service from an alley location and keep the containers in their garage or in their backyard. For that serviceability, we'd have to bring it into the right-of-way of the alley, which allows the refuse truck to drive through the alley and collect that accordingly.
Agree, but I don't think it says right of way of the alley. I think you just say one is the alley and one is the right of way.
Okay.
Just maybe clarify.
There is no right-of-way in the alley, is there?
Yeah, it is, in a way,
Yeah.
because the whole thing is right of way, just like a street is a right of way,
yeah.
including the parkway or whatever.
Are you just asking that the alley be traversable, or?
No, just, I guess let's look at A16. A16 140, sorry.
Page 18, I think.
Yeah. So backdoor service. An owner or occupant who subscribes to curbside refuse collection shall place their doesn't really say anything in there about location receptacles specifically for alley, maybe.
I know there was a mention of alleys in here because I fielded an email on the issue.
Yeah, and they mentioned it in their explanation just today. And I wrote down 816 140 as a note.
I think in many respects, with the alley collection, you can look at it in terms of billing. It would be, the terms would be like curbside, if it's a village container, and you'd be, the analogy would be like at the curb of an alley, or at the edge of the alley.
Can you-
That's where they would be.
Right. Go back to your slide that talked about that.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
140.
Oh, 140. That is 140.
Yep, this one.
Yeah, curbside residents. It doesn't say, does it say anything specifically about alley residents to be out on the alley or right of way at 7 a.m.? It talks about the back door, it talks about curbside, but not specifically what an alley person does. I'm just to clarify, if you're trying to,
If you're
Clean this up.
suggesting adding a section for alley,
right, maybe. Yeah,
whether they have their own cans or a village can, you still have the same terms.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is the point of introduction, is to get
Totally,
alignment.
yeah. Other than that, that was,
I have one other question. On the curb, I noticed driving, and I don't know if this was after it was picked up or before, if it was significantly out into the street. When it says on the curb, do you mean if there is no parkway to keep it on the street? Are you preferring them to be in the parkway?
It would, according to the code, it would be in the parkway,
Okay.
but it shouldn't be in the right-of-way of the street itself.
Yeah, it says on the curb or parkway, and I think probably some clarification around
Okay.
priority to be on the parkway specifically.
and then maybe the term, if you just mentioned on the curb, it really isn't on the curb, it's off the curb, in the grass of the parkway or whatever that
Driveway.
happens to be. Yeah.
I also have one question, and, on 816 150C, when you're talking about snow, and, the reality of it is most people put their rollables out the evening before,
Yes.
because they don't want to get up at 5 in the morning to make sure that they miss it. But when it snows, what you're doing is putting the obligation for the owner to come out here and shovel out the snow that your people have deposited in front of the receptacles,
This is for,
which doesn't seem fair to me.
this is for special collection.
And trust me, your guys plow everything, and it's a good
Oh,
thing,
it's
because their
horrible.
job is to clear the streets. But at the same time, they furrow over, and then a lot of times, there've been a couple mornings where the guys have come by, and, I only do recycling, so, and the recycling bin will be, prescriptive because the snow overwashed from the plows have knocked it one side or another, so, I don't think it's appropriate to expect the homeowners to come out there and dig out their garbage cans if they place them properly at the curb.
This is the section 140, item C is in relation to the special collections. This is not for the receptacles for curb. So this is if they're leaving bulk materials at the curb.
Disposal of large and bulk items.
Yep.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, so I think I may have accidentally.
Does that provide some clarity?
Yeah, I apologize. I think I included the wrong section in there, but this is regarding the disposal of large and bulk items, special collections.
Special collections.
Oh, okay.
Got it.
Gotcha. Then it's okay. Any other questions?
No.
Tina, you've been thinking about garbage on your way in? Yep. And you don't have any questions?
No, well,
You mean
I'm
garbage.
I'm a convert. One of the scofflaws who got into compliance, so I'm all in.
Okay. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions, we'll open it up for public comment. Does anybody in the audience, would they like to speak this evening on the revisions to our refuse code? Come on up, Tom.
Evening, Tom Brown, Hampton Hill Avenue, where the wood chips flow. There is, and we know this, there's a lot of ambient noise about Winnetka overregulating its population, citizens, developers, and the like. And I wonder, in this case, two questions. One is, have we really had a compelling need for this new precision in the regulations to come out with how you position your receptacle, what time of day you bring it? Bob, I absolutely agree with you that it's within the realm of reason. It's a nice bracket of time. We should all be able to accomplish it. But leading to the second question, if we blow it, and I'm not the most precise guy every week putting my garbage container out, are we going to have garbage police finding us? What is the enforcement going to be here? What can we anticipate? Are we talking about a warning? Please don't do that again. Are we talking about a fine? But when you start layering on this, I appreciate the aesthetics and I appreciate the sensibility of trying to have an agreed set of principles for how these things should be done. But hardwiring it into the code in this fashion begs the question, if we goof, what happens? Has there really been so much abuse of this privilege to date to merit building it in this way? It just seems a bit overbearing. As sensible as I agree with the general notion is, it sounds in a bit overbearing.
Gio, you want to give this a first shot, and then I'll jump in.
Sure, thank you for the public comment. We've, in the recent year that we've actually rolled out the curbside program, we've noticed that there have been areas of concerns. That's why we've included this in the code, where residents were not complying with the aesthetics of the village by leaving containers out. And there's no way of I want to say, holding them to the fire and having them accountable for complying with the aesthetics of this village. I think having something in the code does provide us a little bit of, I think, meat in this competition to make sure we comply, or make sure they comply with the aesthetics for the village. And that was our focus for this. We want to make sure that we are having proper containers on the curb and off the curb in a timely fashion, and this is not an inconvenience to the other residents that may be concerned. So,
Yeah.
sorry.
So as the program is rolled out, our office fielded several complaints about containers staying out for days on end. That's one category. Another category was some residents starting to store their garbage literally in their front yard that's visible from the street, which had never really been the guidance, the administrative guidance from the village. And without something to hang your hat on, you can't really compel proper aesthetics that we believe or understand that the village would like to have. In terms of taking a heavy hand, no, that's not been the Winnetka way. But we do have to have something to rely upon to say, yes, these are our regulations. So if somebody is storing their refuse in their front yard, we can say, please move it, and we work with them to come into compliance. Same thing with the proper cans in the back. There's numerous attempts to get somebody into the proper compliance before any action would be taken. So it's not a heavy enforcement action, and we're not out there patrolling it. So it's usually on a complaint basis.
Sure, come on up, Tom.
Candidly, my friend, if those were the complaints, you've come at it with an approach that's a fairly heavy hand. I mean, there will be abuses where people put their dump in the front yard. I think you can build a regulation that speaks to those rather than with the precision of saying how your container must be placed on the parkway, how the back handle has to face the street, the opening has to front. I mean, that's what rings in my mind as being a little bit heavy-handed. The times, I understand them, and I think we can work with that. I think just a gentler approach may have been merited in this case, given the complaints you've seen.
Great, thank you. Anybody else like to speak to this? Hearing none, I'll close public comment on this issue and ask council for any additional comments, questions, or discussion.
You know, the only thing I would say, Chris, and to Tom's points, you know, when this change was made to the curbside and so on, you know, the surveys on village services, this was like the most popular service we had in the village, was refuse collection. The back door, it was just something that, it was like 99% approval. And so some of us were thinking, why are we changing this? You know, what are we doing here? And the reason we changed it, one, long-term, you know, there's efficiencies and cost impact that we just have to consider here. Two, the labor force, Gio, I think that the curbside was becoming very difficult for the labor force physically. I mean, just in terms of health, the back door was. But again, some of us were kicking and dragging, worrying about how this was going to look. Now, again, my neighborhood, it looks fine. I mean, I haven't noticed any problems, but you're saying, Rob, that there are some areas where, or Gio's saying that there have been some problems. And, you know, I hear what you're saying on that, Tom, but, you know, I don't think there's going to be much fining going on here at all. And the way the lids are positioned, I think that has to do with how ultimately it's all picked up. Is that correct? I mean, it gets back to the labor, the physical
Yes.
aspect of this job.
Yes, Trustee Dearborn.
So,
The other driving reason was to give residents a choice in terms of how they wanted to scale their service. We heard a lot of requests that, you know, the two-can back door, we'd like more options, and to be able to, it's almost like a reverse volume-based system where you can have a small can, medium, or large. But if you're going to do that, it has to go to the curb for efficiency reasons. And the popularity has grown by a few points ever since we rolled it out. So it's now a majority of the service at this point.
Yes, it is.
Others? Alls I can say is I will keep my back door until
you're forced
I am
otherwise.
forced otherwise, because I've told this story a million times. When I first moved to Winnetka, I used to have to pay off my garbage collectors in Evanston to take my regular pickup and beg them to not come down the alley, and because it was a rotten alley and everything. And then one day I moved to Winnetka, and I wake up one morning and I hear some rattling around at my back door, and there's some guy taking my garbage. It was like, for me, that was like I thought I died and went to heaven. And the only other epiphany of moving to Winnetka was when I woke up after the first snow and saw a village equipment driving by and shoveling my sidewalk too. So I like my back door collection, and I will keep it as long as village council permits me to do so. So, but I know other people don't have a problem with it. So, all right, well, let's see if we can move this forward. Can I have a motion here to introduce ordinance number MC2 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's introduced. Rob, you've got notes there. Maybe you can tweak this a little bit?
You have notes as well? We got it?
Yes, President Rins and trustees, thank you so much for the direction, and we look forward to incorporating that in the amendment for the next, I think it's on August 2nd.
Second. Yep.
We'll have the on consent, hopefully.
Right, thank you. And good job, Diane. Really good to see you at the microphone tonight.
Thank you, Village Council, I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, we'll move forward. Item 9, old business, we have none. Item 10, new business, the annual comprehensive financial report. The village's 2021 audit has been completed, and the annual comprehensive financial report has been distributed to the council and posted on the village website. Here to review the results is the finance director, Tim Sloth, Ron Amon, partner with Lauterbach and Amon, and Tim is up there to review. Take it away.
Thank you, and good evening. Presented for your review is the village's annual comprehensive financial report for the year ending December 31st, 2021, otherwise known as the audit. The main focus of an audit is to provide the village's financial stakeholders a reasonable assurance that our financial statements are accurate and complete. With me is the village's accounting manager, Del Duckworth, who was integral in compiling the audit, as well as Ron Amon, who is here from the auditing firm Lauterbach and Amon, and will be breaking down the report later as part of his presentation. Before turning it over to Ron, I did want to cover a few items of note regarding the audit. First, the audit was prepared in accordance with the high standards of the Governmental Accounting Standards Board and also the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Program. The Certificate of Achievement Program recognizes local governments that go above and beyond the minimum requirements of generally accepted accounting principles and prepare the annual comprehensive financial report in the spirit of transparency and full disclosure. As in prior years past, we fully expect to continue to win this prestigious award. Also, as part of the audit process, the auditors provide a management letter which documents any findings related to internal controls, and the 2021 audit resulted in no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Moving on now to reviewing some of the major funds identified in the report, and starting with the general fund. The general fund is the main operating fund of the village and posted a surplus of $3.43 million. Key drivers of the $3.43 million surplus include, first, revenue came in at 103% of budget. And if you recall, when we were formulating the 2021 budget, it was the fall of 2020. So at that time, we were still under some significant COVID restrictions. At the time, we were, at the end of the economic downturn, but we didn't know it probably at that point. So when we were preparing the budget, we were pretty conservative with our revenue estimates for 2021. So we budgeted, again, pretty conservatively, and the performance of revenues in 2021 came in pretty typical and actually favorable than what was anticipated. Additionally, we held the line on expenditures with all departments operating within their approved budgets. So expenditures, while revenues were 103% of budget, expenditures came in at 91% of budget. So in total, the general fund unassigned fund balance currently stands at $30.03 million, or 118% of operating expenditures. The village's fund balance policy requires a minimum of 50% of budgeted operating expenditures, but it should be noted that as part of the stormwater financial plan that was presented in November 2020, the village planned a drawdown of $11 million in fund balance over the next 5 years that would be dedicated towards the stormwater project. Moving on to the enterprise funds, or the utilities, total cash balances in the utility funds increased 5% from $28.1 million to $29.6 million, with cash positions increasing in the electric, water, refuse, and sanitary funds, offset by a small decrease in the stormwater fund. In terms of capital spending for the year, capital spending totaled $7.3 million, which was about 41% of budget. The unspent capital is mostly in the stormwater fund, as we had budgeted funding in case we were in position to begin the stormwater project in 2021. As we know, we began the work just recently. And finally, in regards to the village's pensions, the results of the audit shows that funding status of the public safety pension funds increased in 2021. The police pension currently stands at 89.31% funded, up from 76.77% in 2020, and the fire pension fund stands at 81.57% funded, up from 74.32% in 2020. Both funds are up due to positive investment performance in 2021, along with changes to assumptions adopted by both pension funds, wherein specifically they increased their assumed rate of return from 6.25% to 6.75%. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, IMRF, the pension system that covers most of the non-public safety staff, is currently at 110% funded, up from 99.8%. And like the public safety pension funds, the improvement was largely driven by investment performance. So at this time, we'll turn it over to Ron Amon, who is here tonight to present the report in more detail and answer, between Ron and I, will answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Tim, and good evening. as I always try to do, thank staff, because sometimes I forget. So Dell, thank you. Tim, thank you. It's a team effort. We start back in, I think I came out here in December, meet with staff, go through the whole process, and now we're 6 months further along, and we finally make it to this point. So we appreciate the teamwork that staff gives us to be able to get to this point. The only additional thing, other than Tim talking about a lot of the numbers, by Illinois state statute, all units of government are required to have an auditor's opinion. So once again, our opinion looks very different than in the past. So if you would take last year's audit and start comparing it, our industry likes to keep tweaking up things that us accountants who work on numbers and they work on our wordsmiths. So the opinion looks very different, but once again, your opinion is clean, or what we now call unmodified, and it's the only opinion you want from your auditors. And other than that, I can answer any questions either about the audit process or about the financial report or any of the numbers that Tim talked about as well. So.
All right, let's open it up for questions and comments. I have one quick one.
Mhm.
Tim, you mentioned that the IMRF is 110. Can you guys explain to me why we are overfunded on a pension plan?
Sure. So the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, they've moved to a two-tiered system, and so there's a couple reasons. So the second tier is the benefits are significantly less generous than the benefits for the tier one, and we're at a point where the tier two employees outnumber the tier one, so there's getting some actuarial lift from that, and also just the overall investment performance over the last several years, the last two in particular, have really increased the funding status of that fund. So,
If, Tim, you want to mention, as a result, our rate will drop.
yeah, so how that works is now that it's, we've seen our rate go from about 16% about 10 years ago down to 11%, and then this year it's going to be under 8%, the rate that we pay. So it's a little different, the funding mechanism for IMRF compared to the public safety pension funds. It's funded by, the employer portion's funded by a rate that IMRF gives us in advance of the year, and that's implied, to your salary, similar to how Social Security would be applied as a rate, and that's how it's collected. So as IMRF fluctuates in funding, our rate goes up and down based on their actuarial analysis.
What's the hard dollars involved with that overfunding? How much?
I don't have the hard dollar amount, or what that translates into a dollar amount, of how much it's overfunded. But we'll see some significant savings with that rate coming down next year, as in terms of, the reduction from 11% to 7.5%, that rate.
Well,
We can follow up with that
Yeah.
number, though.
I'd like the ballpark of what that
the,
hard dollar is.
Yeah.
well, Chris, you've jumped right into the guts of the financials, and that's the pensions, of course.
Hope I didn't ruin your fun, Bob.
No, that was not my first topic, but I'll jump in here.
So I'm sorry, so we pulled it up, it's $9.3 million.
So there's a
Overfunded.
the village
That-
portion as a net
Wait a
asset.
minute, wait a minute.
Yeah, hold on a sec. Yeah.
Right.
Wait. I'm getting beat up by the members of the firefighters and the police pension fund, the guys that we send, right? About the fact that on our rate of returns and that we're underfunding those two particular public safety pension funds. And,
Well, there's a whole math behind this.
yeah, I understand it, but
And-
you know what? I mean, they're beating
Yeah.
me up because we're underfunding, and I hear it a lot. And then all of a sudden, the one that we aren't paying any much attention to because it's healthy, we're 9 million over.
Well, you don't control that one, which gets to the whole transfer of our pensions to the state. We don't control that either. But in the report, which was pretty interesting on the pensions, so we have a 9.3 million, and Ron, I'm interested in your view on this, a net asset position on the IMRF. We have almost an equal offset of a liability. Maybe, I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are for the public safety pensions, but IMRF has an assumed rate of return of 7.25, which,
Okay.
it just makes the numbers look, and it says in the report, If they went to 6.25, which is where we have had our assumed rate of return, which I think is more reasonable, we'll see this year, of course, we would swing to over $9 million liability if IMRF went to 6.25 versus 7.25.
And what does that put
So-
us on percentage funded then?
Well, then we'd be underfunded.
Well,
Right,
it
which-
just
which
to-
is normal.
Right, so it's just,
Right.
and we've moved, and what's gonna happen here, I think, Tim, and maybe you have a thought on this, is that all of our pension percentages have improved, you know, because of the math that has changed behind our assumptions here, that we've been forced into this. We were on a pretty good path of fully funding by 2035 at 6.25. It was very conservative, and that's where you're getting beaten up,
Right.
because that's where we were. But the state is dragging us into a less good position. I mean, that's just the bottom line, and they're gonna say, well, IMRF, you know, look at our great funding here. Well, it's just there because, and Ron, tell me if I'm wrong, it's just there because of the assumed rate of return. I mean, I
That-
don't, you know.
That's a component. I mean, just to compare the, you know, the impact, the actuary funds for the fire is 81.57% funded. If it was utilizing the IMRF return of 7.25%, it would jump it up to 86.5%. Police is 89% funded at the assumed rate of return of 6.75. Utilizing the IMRF rate of 7.25, it jumps up to almost 95% funded. So that half a percentage point, you know, really is significant in terms of the funding status. And just also, IMRF, and things can change quickly. In 2018, that $9 million positive was, I think, almost a $10 million liability. So, I mean, the investment performance for the last couple of years has really impacted.
Okay.
But Chris, even our 80-some-odd% funding rate, Tim, and you and I talked about this, if we were on our old program of 6.25 and so
It
on
would be
and so
much
forth,
lower.
we'd be much lower.
We'd be
So
in the 70s. probably.
70s, something or other, and
So the fire at the old percentage would be at 76.73% versus the 81, and the police would be at 84% versus 89%.
About a 5 point.
yeah, I mean,
And we're still doing pretty good with the police then. I mean, that's a good number.
we're doing fine, but it's fuzzy math that's behind this, and it's really troubling because, and Tim's gonna report, I think, in the next month or so on sort of the transition and kind of what our
Yes.
funds look like in the new system. You know, 5-10 years from now, you know, who knows? You know, we're under Big Brother's auspices now, and it's concerning. It would concern me.
It is.
But,
Well, I'll let you keep rolling.
all right.
then.
if I
That was the
can-
only question I had.
All right, Ron, just a couple quick things here, if you don't mind. On the management letter, and a couple of our deficiencies, if you will, and they're very minor, I understand that. And Tim, you may want to comment on the Information Technology Fund or whatever, what's it called here? Information Technology. We were underfunded last year, we're more underfunded this year. Why don't we just have a system, it's not that much money, why don't we just have a system where we fund it? Why are we running deficits in that
So if,
fund?
in both the liability fund and the information technology fund, we've had some significant drawdowns of fund balance. The liability fund, we've been utilizing that to cover our COVID expenses until we get some reimbursement from FEMA, which was somewhat reflected in this. And then also in the information technology, as we know, with cyber risk, we've seen some significant expenses over the last couple of years. So we will be addressing that as part of the budget process. I just want to make sure I have you know, make sure I'm hitting the right amount in terms of the chargeback to the different departments of how much that fund truly and the expenses truly are going to be on an annual basis as some of these kind of one-time costs in terms of beefing up our cyber systems. We replaced a ton of servers and network hardware over the last couple of years. So before kind of jumping the gun and making a big transfer, adjusting everybody's internal service charge, we want to make sure we have a clear handle on what our expenses are going forward. So as part of this next budget process, we will have that fine-tuned to clear that fund balance deficiency and also properly charging going forward.
Well, you know, I think it's fair to say that IT services and cyber security and so on is probably not going to be a reduced budget item
Nope.
for institutions like the village. And maybe we just need to have a, a line item that just covers this or something. I mean,
We do. It's its own separate fund, and it gets chargebacks by each department. So if there's heavier departments that use it, but one of the biggest things, that, just simple cyber insurance, that I think was 13,000 when we first got it, was almost 50,000 last year. So it's skyrocketed the
Yeah.
last couple of
Well,
years.
that's right.
We're getting a better understanding of what these expenses truly are. Going forward with the new, where we used to just, the IT department was a data processing department, break fix. We're trying to be more proactive, obviously with the new cyber threats and making sure that we're all over the cyber components of it. So I think we have a pretty good understanding of what our expenses are going to be. I think the market's probably starting to stabilize a little bit. Don't kill me if the cyber insurance comes back significantly higher again this year, but we're getting a better handle on it. So we will
Okay.
make sure to budget it
And in
appropriately.
turn, it's an internal service fund that charges back to the departments. And as the capital investment normalizes and is put on a regular schedule, then we should not see this. This should level out, and we'll have a better sense of what the departments need to contribute to that fund.
So I guess I want to make sure, you have a general cyber insurance, which is kind of divvied out by department? And then
No,
you
it's our broad, I'll let Tim speak to the cyber insurance. I'm talking about the internal charges for the IT expenses, such as computers, your servers, the email.
Right,
all
that's by
gets
I get that.
Gets distributed.
But is there other cyber activity that's charged out other than your insurance?
No.
That's-
We have
Sure.
consultants for that.
Yes, we have MDR software, that's the Managed Detection Response software, various cyber, alert systems. We have annoying email filters that I'm sure all of you have gotten caught up in at some point.
But you're not using different ones for different departments?
No.
You're using,
No, it's the
Okay.
same, it's
Great.
we're just saying the funding mechanism
Just
so
making
that,
sure. It's
yeah.
just funding, okay.
Yeah, if the police isn't using something different than fire and something different, we're all using the same thing.
Okay.
It's just that, police have squad computers, for example, so they get charged a little bit more than what,
Yep.
the village managers
That's
does.
great.
So,
can I go on?
Sure.
All right. First off, this is always a good report, Ron. I would think you would think it's a pretty good report, too. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of information in here. And, I start off, and we're looking at, one of the largest capital investments in the village in history with stormwater. We know that. We're going to be, looking at the numbers real carefully on an ongoing basis, of course. But the general fund is part of that, and, Tim, you mentioned that. So when we were sitting here in October doing the budget last year, when we affirmed our budget and then it was ratified in December, we assumed, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, that the general fund would be roughly 24.6 million at this time. So we didn't have the full 2020 financials in at the time, but I think when we were doing our budget, we thought it would be $24.5 million. It started the year actually over 26 million, so we were a little more profitable in 2020 than was anticipated, and now we're at 30 million. So I would only make the point that that is going to, I think, unless we just, and some of that's deferred capital, some of that's going to probably go away, but I think some of the efficiencies that we saw in the past year and a half or 2 years is going to help the numbers on stormwater, because we know that, we're going to be, it's hard to know exactly every line item in stormwater, but, we're probably going to need a few extra dollars along the way, and so that's going to be helpful. So I think that was good. The other point, couple points I would make is, when people, we all pay high taxes, and we've made this point for a long time, that the village has been consistently a smaller percentage of a resident's tax bill. In Winnetka, with, we've gone from 19% to 13% over 10, 12 years, or whatever, 15 years, whatever it's been. And when you look at some of these, and I'm going to applaud some of the management and so on, you look at the full-time staff. We have fewer full-time employees today than we had 10 years ago.
Right.
Which is pretty remarkable. We've held the line on the levy, other than for new development, less than 1% a year for the last 10 years. This is all in here year by year. Our long-term debt outstanding is less than it was 8 years ago, or whatever. And, you know, when you kind of go through the numbers, and Ron, I'm just kind of interested in your thoughts on this report, Winnebago's financial position. I look at it and I see the pensions as being sort of the elephant in the room, because I don't sort of like the way we ended up with that. We didn't have any choice, but I don't like the way we ended up. But that, aside from that, are we pretty rock solid?
So I try to do my best to first qualify my answer by saying I'm your auditor and I'm not supposed to talk about policy, but I'll talk about policy with you. So what's happened in the last couple of years, and you know, one of the benefits I get and our firm gets is we get to see a lot of financial information from just lots of local government in Illinois. And as Tim and I talked before, and what we get to see is there used to be a lot of trends you could see and follow and know where everybody was at. But once COVID happened and the idea of how conservative you want to be towards budgeting revenues, and the true control local governments like you guys have is you have control over your expenditures. And that piece, most of the governments are in line to what they thought over the last couple of years as they made all their adjustments. But the revenue piece is really hard. And some municipalities are more conservative than others. I personally don't think there's a right or a wrong way to go, but it's the idea to be thinking about 5 years or 10 years from now. So your pensions, when I think of your police and fire, your funding levels, they're extremely healthy. And they're higher than the statewide averages. Part of it is the reason of what you have, you know, it's funny math, but it's actuaries. And the difference between actuaries and accountants is we go backwards and all this stuff is old. And the actuaries are trying to predict out there in the future, and that's really hard to do. So as you adjust your rates, the police and fire pension funds can go up and down. The IMRF, the comment I make to all my clients is just invite IMRF to come to this room and talk to them. Like, to be 100% funded it's crazy. Like, it makes no sense to me. Part of it is they changed their funding rate. They went from 7.5 to 7.25. And part of it is they have encouraged all these local governments to be in the 90% funded, and all of a sudden we have the last 2 years prior, you know, at December 31st of 21 of what's happened to the interest rates and the market, as opposed to what they're predicting interest rates will be, as opposed to what they're getting, and you end up with 110% funded. And if I were you guys, I'd be livid. It would drive me nuts on a policy basis if my IMRF plan is 110% funded.
It is.
Yeah, and it's, once again, I'm your auditor, so I got to try to be a little careful, but you don't have control over it. They tell you what the rate is, and they tell you, and people get a vote, but when they change from 7.5 to 7.25, it affects every plan in the state. And you know, Tim already went through the numbers for you guys. If you take your pension funds and adjust those, like, they're $5 million swings, and it's over $9 million that your IMRF fund is overfunded. You guys are putting in about $1.5 million a year. So just tell them you're not going to fund it for 7 years and see what happens. You know? But then we have the interest rates of what's happened in 2022, and the picture next year is going to look very different. So there's a smoothing mechanism that actuaries try to do. But so that piece probably bothers me of what the industry has allowed, like the IMRF, and now what's going to happen to your police and fire, which is, once again, now it's outside of your control again. And so as much as IMRF is where it's at, when you talk about financial health and we talk about your general fund, and you guys have a whole series of your enterprise funds, and then you have a whole series of your internal service funds, you guys are on some trajectory to be in a little bit of a danger zone of levying property taxes and having the fund balances you have. And if you have the plan going forward for next year or in 5 years and it's stormwater, I would probably tell you as your auditor, you probably need to start to make that picture clear in your audit. You get the chance of having some property tax objectors and having some residents that might dive into this thing and say, what's the property taxes and what are we paying? And then what's the fund balance of what they're paying, not just in their property taxes, but just the revenue sources of the village as a whole and where are we going? So that's true with a lot of local government, and I'd probably say just local municipalities right now, because park districts are in a completely different process because of COVID than what the municipal world is. So, yeah, you guys are really healthy financially when you look at your fund balance and then the amount of cash you have. And it can be, you know, as you budget and as you think going forward, if there's a plan, I would probably tell you to start to figure out how to make that plan be clear in where you're going in the next couple of years in the audit process.
Let me interpret that a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So Tim and I, as we've started our budget process for next year, have talked about assigning a section of our fund balance to the stormwater fund, because we have been saving in the general fund, and it's been part of our financial planning. We have more capital than we have funds for, but assigning at least $10 million to the stormwater fund so that it's there, it's earmarked for the capital expenses that we are planned to do. Those are all just now coming into focus with the approval of this most recent contract, and then with the approval of the Cook County Forest Preserve agreement that's going to come this year as well. So assigning those funds now, and then starting to make those general fund transfers to the other projects that we want to complete will put that back in perspective. But we just hadn't done that yet until the project had really we knew we had a project to go.
So Ron, what you're saying, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that there could be, the criticism would be that we are too conservative. We're too flush, if you will. That would be, I'm a property taxpayer.
Right.
Don't, you know, cut my property tax in half. You don't need the money. That's your point.
Right.
And that we should, as part of the upcoming budget process, we should have a 5 to 10 year that incorporates stormwater, sort of a financial rationale, which I think we have. I think we have that. I mean, we're going to be doing this project with a combination of grants, with a combination of existing funds, you know, bond issuance and so on, and general reserves. And hopefully that's going to do the trick. There might be a little bit of a delta there, but what does that mean? You know, so we've been saving for a rainy day, if you will, and now we're going to be using some of that money that's going to prohibit or prevent the issuance of $25 million of long-term debt or something like that.
Yeah, the balance then becomes to me of what, like I said, when I think about where you're at in this topic of, it's not necessarily just today, it's the next year or two, or more like 5 to 10 years. And how what mechanism you use to internally plan for where you're trying to get to. Because if you take your financial statements and you just say like debt, like the amount of debt you have compared to all of your neighbors, like there's no comparisons. Like you guys have none.
Right.
You have one issue left and it's in the stormwater, and I think it's $11 million or maybe $12 million at the end of this audit. So compared to all your neighbors in a debt structure, you guys are as healthy as you get. But what that means is if you don't have the debt, then what the property taxes is being used for is right now, it's kind of being held in your general fund. And some municipalities take and they say they're going to put that into a capital fund. That would still be a governmental fund. It wouldn't be an enterprise fund. And that mechanism can be right or wrong, but like Rob also said, is you can take your general fund and assign the fund balance and say, here's what we're assigning it for the future. And that, the word assign has very special meaning in the audit, but it just means the board is setting this money aside for something in the future that isn't, and that's just a mechanism to say, when I say earlier, of like, make it look like you know where you're going with this. And just to assign fund balance gives it a very different connotation. And you can do that just in your general fund, or you can put the money directly in your stormwater fund, or you could put it in a capital fund that's still a governmental fund, but it's going to be used for capital. Okay. And so it's a incredibly complex, like it would take days and weeks and months and years to like, you know, keep maneuvering the finances. And it's really dangerous to take yourself and compare you to anybody else, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I know where we stand. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, but I think this discussion of planning for what we knew was going to be this enormous capital project, necessary and enormous. You know, we've been planning for that.
Right.
And so all you're saying, I think it's great advice, is that as part of this upcoming budget year, we crystallize for everybody exactly where we see this going. That's part of the reason we're gonna have a capital budget for stormwater, very detailed now that the numbers are coming in. And you know, to make that part of a strategic financial plan,
Yeah.
we should do that.
Yeah.
It's great advice.
Yeah. And it's taken years, like, at this point in time, at December 31st of 2021, to get to where you get to do that is back to what you guys said. It's a testament to the management of where the village is, because not everybody gets to do what you guys get to do now. So,
And going forward, just like we do with stormwater, you know, you're planning past stormwater. You've got other old sewer and water lines, you've got Green Bay Road maybe, you've got the post office, just to start earmarking those improvements that are
Lead
good for
water
the
line
village.
replacement. and-
Correct.
Exactly.
Yep, and
The
just
amount
have,
of unfunded capital is significant, and as we're adding the you know, there's unfinished streetscape, right? 93 Green Bay Road site, the post office, all those things, we can start to sign and allocate fund balance to.
exactly, great, thanks.
Others?
Oh, Bob took up all the time, so.
As it should be.
As it should be. We all have our moments up here, so. Well, Ron, thank you very much. I will tell you that, I mean, it gives me so much comfort to see you standing up there. And I also want to congratulate Dell. I know you do a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and people don't know it, but I know you're back there grinding away and giving these people everything they need so we get these good reports. And Tim, you know, good job. I mean, actually, the one thing I noticed about the audit this year is I didn't hear about it. Usually I'll hear something comes up, or they're scrambling around for this, or you know, the auditor needs some additional information on that certain thing, and I heard none of that this year. So either you guys are getting better at responding, or it was a cleaner slate before you even got started. So, but again, great job all the way around, and look forward to seeing you next year too, Ron. Thanks.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Oh, I forgot about this. Item 11, we're moving forward. Item 11, appointments. There are none this evening. And item 12, closed session. May I have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act, and to adjourn the open meeting automatically and immediately upon the conclusion of the closed session without the conduct of any further business or comments? Question mark?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call vote.
Trustee Swerk?
Yes.
Trustee Dearborn?
Yes.
Trustee Mancini?
Yes.
Trustee Apatow?
Yes.
Trustee Dahlman?
Yes.
We stand, we're going into